gonna have a dream. And you're gonna have it every night.
Moira.
You can't tell anyone.
Moira. It's me.
I want a ticket.
She couldn't tell anyone. But she told him.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Bateman, and I'm the writer-director of the Wanting Mare, and you're listening to the Filmcraziest Show.
Awesome. And I'm Daniel, host of the Filmcraziest Show, and thank you for coming on today.
Of course.
Your film's very unique. Could we start with just talking about the premise, like log line, just for people who don't know yet?
Sure. The movie takes place in a fictional world called Anmaere, and the film entirely happens in a small city called Whithren within that world. And Whithren is in a almost constant heat. It's a very, very, very hot place, and there is an export in Whithren of wild horses. And once a year, a ship comes to basically trap some wild horses and ship them across the sea to another place, which the people in Whithren believe is in a constant winter. Meanwhile, there is basically a family of women, generations of women who live in this little house north of the city, and they are inheriting this dream from mother to daughter. And the story follows sort of 1 to 2 generations of this and the consequences of both the dream and the relationships formed around it.
Okay. How did you go about like world building this, like in a story sense?
Well, that's a wonderful way to ask that question, actually, because I have been talking about this a lot. Because it is a strange sort of world building.
Sure.
I'm definitively not doing a lot of the world building things, which is like who's in charge, what's everyone doing all day, all of these specifics, the little ephemera of cultures and power structures and history and all that sort of stuff. We're not really doing those things in the film. And I think the film's interest is, I'm a huge fantasy fan, and I also love, obviously, like all different types of world building. And I love world building that comes from, such as like Game of Thrones or J.R. Tolkien, like long histories of people and kings and how we arrive at a place. And this is different. This is trying to make a place in a world that is a reflection or a consequence, or an expression, rather. That's probably the best phrase. An expression of the thematics of the film and the people. So the place that, to me, the hope was the cities and the city and the moorlands and the houses and the clothes, costumes, like all of this stuff is the world. And I wanted all of that to have a feeling that was in line with what the movie was about to me. So the world is hopefully, and all of this is a completely stolen idea in my mind from Emily Bronte in Wuthering Heights, everything is subsequent to me in Wuthering Heights to the feeling of this sort of like gothic staining love, and the trees and the mud and the dirt, everything is, it's not a love story that happens in Yorkshire. I think she turns Yorkshire into a love story to me. So that was the hope, trying to take as much of that as I could.
Okay. So yeah, I haven't read that one or seen the movie, if there's a movie.
Yeah, I think there's like so many movies, but interestingly, which is a wonder, in the long line of movies, film adaptations of great books, I feel like there's always something that happens where they have to lop off the ending. It might be a happy ending, or just the nature of novels can kind of, et cetera, off in an interesting way. And then basically every film adaptation of Wuthering Heights is like the first barely half of the novel, and then they're just like, we don't know what to do with the second half, which is their kids, and it's a repetition of a similar sort of thing. So
okay. So that, but sorry, what's it called again?
Wuthering Heights.
Wuthering Heights. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Now, so that's was your main kind of like story reference of like kind of not so much basing it off of, but just starting.
Right. Yeah, I think the whole sense of that novel to me is I'm obsessed with, which is like a thing. There's like a large group of people around the world who are very obsessed with Wuthering Heights, and I certainly am one of them. I find it like moving, both in the content and how she wrote it and the choices, and it just was a big artistic ideal to me to be like, man, how do I get anywhere near whatever is happening here? But that goes in the pot, I guess, with all the other things, which is, half of my brain is like Lord of the Rings, and then the other half of my brain is maybe like a pretentious art film fan. So that's probably a good description of the movie or warning, rather.
Okay, two very distinct parts.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. For me, I got I haven't read Winter's Tale, but I got like a sense of that, what that film was trying to be in this film, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Just in visuals.
What film did you say? I'm sorry.
It's Winter's Tale.
Oh, I haven't seen that actually.
Okay, the film adaptation was, I think, was
Colin
butchered.
Farrell in that?
Yeah, and then Russell Crowe doing a really weird Irish accent.
Oh, right. That's like Akiva Gold, maybe one of
Akiva Goldsman.
Yes.
Yes. Brutal film.
I've wanted to watch that.
I don't mean to.
You know what?
I don't mean that as your film, but just your film does it better with what they were trying to do, I think.
I think I remember reading like a log line for that once and being like, oh, that's like kind of cool. I should probably make sure whatever this is, and I have never returned to it. But I think I know of it because at one point I was like, this is kind of close.
Thematically, they both have horses. Yeah. I think that's about it.
Oh, really? I forgot about the horses.
I think they do. Honestly, I watched it like 6 years ago. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Now, I also, have you seen Atlantics, French?
I have not.
Okay. I don't
really want to.
I don't mean to be like, oh, let's compare your film to other films, but that felt like very much like a spiritual cousin, just in the way that both of you films are trying to get to a better place. The characters are trying to get to a better place.
It's on my long watch list.
I have a long
watch list. It looks so beautiful.
Yeah, for sure. Now, visually, how did you? Because you're the VFX supervisor as well. How did you go about visually creating this world as well?
I think it was the thing I keep reiterating is that like at no point were we prepared to make the movie. Like I don't think any of us had any of the skills required to be like, we're going to go, make this movie in this very, very unorthodox way that's going to take years to, complete if we managed to do it. That it became the plan at a certain point because that's what we were doing. That was the only way to make the movie. But we weren't prepared for it. And, I certainly had like an aesthetic sense of the things that I liked and the things that I didn't like. And David Ross, who's the director of photography, he and I have made stuff together for, like a decade. And so both of our visual minds and eyes have grown, intertwined, like it sort of kind of can't pull it apart. And the same with the production designer, Cassandra Baker. So the three of us sort of founded this thing probably around like 2012. And between the three of us and in the different worlds, it was like, it's this and it's that, and it's sort of like the 1940s, but then it's not, and and trying to find that little space where you know, everything's kind of in balance, and that was a hard thing, both in terms of like the production design itself, like, are there cars? What are the cars? Can you get away with a phone? What's a phone look like? As well as the visual effects of saying, you know, because if you start with something on a person on a green screen, and you're saying, all right, we're going to put this thing behind them. That sounds easy at the beginning to us. It sounded like, yeah, we're going to do a matte painting or something, that was like my sphere of experience at that point, like digital matte paintings. However, there's like so many questions that you wind up having to ask to fill out whatever that is, you know, and that's partially why the movie took so long, because there's like I keep saying there's like an instinctual level to it of just having to constantly answer these questions of like, how bright do you want this? How dark do you want this? Is this like very blue or kind of gray, or, you know, and the scale of those answers move the movie from, you know, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows to like the first Harry Potter to Lord of the, you know, those are all sort of different scales of those answers. So I think all, you know, and the film in terms of the visual effects was made by myself, Zach Schaefer, who's also was the gaffer and producer, and then Jared Condes, who was the Steadicam operator and co-producers, and David Ross, who's director of photography. So that's basically the people who did the visual effects. So it was all of us from day one trying to figure out what the movie looked like. So we benefited from having a very small crew, because you don't really have a lot of different ideas, you know? So everything serves, hopefully, which is the luck that we had. If you take 5 years to make something between 3 people, it's going to look probably pretty unique, because every scene is going to be touched by those sort of 3 people's instincts, instead of like a team of 1,000 people being like, this is it, you know?
Okay. You said you started this 5 years ago, just filming it?
The first bit, I'm like, you know, constantly being like, how long is it? The first section that we filmed, which is the part that I'm in, was 2016.
Okay.
So, and then there was like a lead up of about a year before that of being like, okay, we're actually going to go do this thing. But we had been talking about trying to do it really since like 2012, 2013. And I was just kind of bouncing around working for people, learning kind of what I could and trying to, you know, meet people that made movies, and also raise money. Like, I basically was trying to raise any amount of money for 8 years or 7 years or whatever it was, couldn't raise a dollar. And then once we were like, okay, we're going to start, then it became possible. So I'm also lucky that, like, you know, in 2014, someone was like, this is a great idea, go make a movie, because it would have been a very different thing.
Okay, neat. Yeah, but yeah, like I was gonna go to, you definitely, it sounds like a small scale team, a lot of things, but you make it feel big, I guess.
Great, thank you. That was our hope the whole time. How do we, you know, cover our tracks?
And the visuals, it feels like it looks apocalyptic, but hopeful, right?
Good. Yeah, that way we were trying to. It's funny, the word apocalyptic is something that has popped up over the past like year or two, showing the movie to people, and it's interesting because it at no point has my brain really thought about like post-apocalyptic movies or like Mad Max or The Road or something like that. I think about it because I guess I always feel like post-apocalyptic implies that there was like a great metropolis that fell or something, you know, like there was a collapse of the modern world. And I kind of always imagine the world and all the other stuff I've been writing, and I imagine it as sort of stagnation. Like, I think it just is like an industrializing very slowly. Which is maybe an extension of, like, you know, fantasy films that take the medieval period and they stretch it out to like 1,000 years. They're 30,000 years if you're talking, you know. which is really only like aesthetically like 200 years of our time, 300 years of our time. They're like, well, if that, and they'll be like, well, let's just make it really, really long. So I'm sort of doing that with like just a post-industrialized world where it's like we have a couple things here and we don't really need much else. So it's probably going to look like this hundreds of years.
Okay, so just rooted in that realism more than like a dystopian world kind of thing.
Which is how I think of the sci-fi word has been. Well, also I put a review in the trailer that says sci-fi, so I'm partially. But there isn't any science fiction in the movie. Clearly, there's not like a bit of counting that happens. But it is fun. I guess it's fun that people are having a hard time characterizing it. So that's something that's very exciting. I like all the things where we're like, I don't know if that's it. And other people are like, no, it's this. It's definitely that. We're quite tickled by that.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, even with you saying, "Oh, Wuthering Heights," and then me being like, "Okay, it's kind of like Winter's Tale, Atlantics," but I also got like just like in the fantasy of it, I definitely got like okay, like young adult adaptations of like novels like that. Wish they were this fantastical kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
So those are the senses I was getting. So it's just interesting hearing the interpretations and then your own interpretation of your own film.
Yeah. Also, I'm also a firm believer of like, it doesn't quite matter what I think at a certain point. It's the thing that people are like, oh, no, it's this. So I enjoy everyone's versions of it.
In the closing credits, your cinematographer is it David A. Ross?
Yes, David Ross.
Okay.
David A. Ross.
Now he was the second credited person. I feel like just to me that's made it seem like, okay, this is how important he was as well as Cassandra was to the production of the film. Yes.
David is the reason the movie was made on many, many different levels. I like to just talk about him like he's a director of photography because I think he is a genius camera person and lighting person, and sort of his visual taste is impeccable, which is like I'm more in awe of that than like technical skill. As both of our technical skill has like increased as we've just been able to make more stuff, his taste has always been perfect. Where he's like, that doesn't look good, or that does look good, and he'll just figure out a way to make it look good. And but on the other side, he also is the person that I lived in like LA for like 5 years working on other movies, and David was still on the East Coast, which is where we had met and are both from. And he was trying every possible way to find people who would invest in the movie. So, and that's how the movie got made. If I had stayed in LA and continued like poking around and working for other people and being like, this movie's going to happen this way, I still wouldn't be there doing that. So the movie only exists because of David. And not only that, like he, has been and is my like constant companion in this. Like I didn't even have anywhere to live, and he like rented an office and was like, work on the movie. So I'm just like eternally, he's like my brother basically. And Cassandra is the same. Cassandra, I met her through David, and Cassandra was, the sort of the artist soul of the movie. It's Cassandra's of saying, like, make the movie that you want to make, do it in the manner that you want to do it, and intense education and awareness of the thing that you're making is like one of these great lessons I've learned from Cassandra, which is, she had an MFA from Pratt in painting. So I'd be like, oh, I really like this sort of thing. And she'd be like, well, yes, this person did this 60 years ago, and you should probably learn about it. I don't know if you've seen the behind the scenes, but Cassandra passed away in November, the end of November, about 3 weeks after we finished the movie.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, I've had different scales of being able to talk about it today. As you can see, it's a harder day, but yeah. Yeah.
When I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So 1 sec.
Sure.
No, we're good. I didn't expect to cry on this one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, the thing I'd like.
I'm sorry for your loss, though.
Oh, thank you. The thing I'd like to say about this is that, well, first off, I'm, every day is a different thing. Where I'm like, I'm going to be able to talk about it today. I'm not going to be able to talk about it today. But, and I'm trying to figure out the manner and how to talk about her and all these things. And here's something that's like sort of important to me is that like, there's this lead up to the movie of like 7 years or something, whatever. My numbers obviously keep changing. Of basically like the three of us and a couple of people get looped in along the way. Jordan, Monahan, Edmund Kofi, people who basically spent long amounts of time wanting to be able to make this movie and being like, I have something to say. We can do this thing that's going to be really great. And the centerpiece of that feeling is Cassandra, because she was a painter, and painters to me have, of all the like artists, have the least interest in a classical sense in I don't know, whatever, like the pop culture of the filmmakers do. Like in my mind, the consciousness of a painter that I have come to know through Cassandra was that you have a studio and you have a thing to say, and you get up every morning and you paint, and like you're not necessarily concerned about whatever gallery has hired you or how many different paintings I can come up with and how many people are looking at the paintings. Like there's a sense of what you're doing should have a longer shelf life. And so I've spent a lot of time, obviously, since November trying to process a person and their place in my life, and it's somebody I basically talk to every day for like 10 years. And a huge portion of that was this idea of keep going. And like, I think if you were to do a scale of our conversations, most of them are 2 a.m., for years. And it was like, she's painting and I'm like, we got to make this movie. What are we going to do? We got to make this movie. So yeah, I mean, the other extension of that is I think people who make things are lucky to have other people around them. And that's the only way things do get made. There's a lot of stuff of, movies with people who are multi-hyphenates, but I'm a firm believer that there is no version of this movie ever where I'm able to make by myself. Yeah, so.
Okay, thank you for sharing that though. And I think,
sure.
I think your heart and soul does come through in the film. I think you can feel it there. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Now, when you're in the scene acting, is that David handling the director hat behind the camera, or how does that work?
Yeah, it was split between two people who carried the weight of me putting myself in the movie, which was David, and I trust David like so implicitly that obviously there's no monitor. I don't know if you've seen the behind the scenes documentary, but we made one. And the stuff that we did when I'm not in it, obviously we have a lot more resource than people. We had a monitor to be able to watch, but like in that first bit, I'm not seeing any of that footage until we offload it. And if I had time to look at it that night. So I'm like trusting David is like, this looks good, this doesn't look good. And then also, so if he doesn't think, like, he knows also what I want constantly. So he's able to be like, this isn't what you want. That looks good. Also, David is something I don't talk about enough, is that like he's such a visually poetic person. David represents my best impulses of being like, do you really need to say this? Can't we just do that? Doesn't that express this? Is this person standing here and doing, So he's constantly simplifying things in an amazing way. And then in the other scenes, like, Jordan is my scene partner, and Jordan and I are so close and had known each other for a long period of time and had basically planned the movie together, that she's like an incredibly studied actor. So it was really fun because we know each other, never got to act together. So it was like, she would push me as well. Like there's a scene that I love, which is one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and I did it the first time. I was like really excited about it, and she was like, "Are you gonna do it that way?" I was like, "Why are you?" I got like pissed. I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do it that way." She's like, "Well, I mean, I don't know. Like there is also this version where you can do it." It's like, and almost, I mean, she was always correct, and I would just get so frustrated. But she was always correct, which is why I would get frustrated. She's like, "That doesn't make sense," So that was, the first section was really great because we hadn't filmed anything, no one had seen anything. We didn't know if any of it worked. So there was a more open sense of everyone's like, well, here's my idea. This could work. This could work. So I think that first 35 minutes of the movie is like a real group effort. So, and I don't want to ever act in my movies again. So you'll never see me in my own movies again. I get to keep making more. It's not fun at all. So
okay, making movies is fun, but not acting.
Yeah, I love actors. So it's just like if I'm just stealing my favorite thing for myself, which is being able to work with actors. If I'm one of the actors, like what a bummer.
Okay.
Well, that's just, yeah.
So never gonna see your shaved head on screen again.
No. Maybe of like my joke is like a Hamlet, like father's ghost or something. If I get to keep making movies, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll show up, be like, say something cool, and then that's it. Otherwise, you'll never see me again.
Okay. For people at home who can't see the podcast, Nicholas now has long hair again.
Return to my full form.
Like a Pokemon evolution. Like
yeah.
Oh, okay. So what parts of this film were actually filmed in Nova Scotia?
So that's the first section. So the first section, which is myself and Jordan, that basically at that point I was terrified of whatever my limited visual flexibility was. And I knew that I wanted stuff where it's like, there's like 3 shots, which I'm now under, you can accuse those shots of being very like Terrence Malick-y. However, at no point in those shots are you imagining that a computer made them. So I'll take the, you know what I mean? I'll take the toll of being like, oh, this is very like Tree of Life-y. But we wanted to go somewhere where we could get an actual shot in one camera move that was very messy, and we were aware it's going to be messy, not fakely messy, of like people walking around in grass near cliffs by the water. And I just basically looked at Google Maps, and like went up the East Coast and then compared that to Airbnb. And at some point I kept going, and I'm in Nova Scotia. And we were like, man, Newfoundland, how cool would that be? And they're like, oh, you got to take a ferry. That's not possible. And the house that we filmed in is an Airbnb, which you can rent and go to.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, we literally just packed a couple people in the car and drove there. And we had never been there. We got out of the car and we're like, okay, this is where we're going to shoot this part of the movie. So the funny part is this, the latter part of the film where she's on the porch and older Lawrence drops, the sister off and they say goodbye at the end. Like all the stuff in that house at the end, that's all in a warehouse in Patterson that is sort of mimicking this Airbnb location. So like a huge portion of the movie was almost by chance, even still though that location we digitally we changed stuff around about it. But the burst scene in the beginning, that is in the attic of that little house, and that window literally looks out right onto the ocean. And there's audio in the dialogue track in that first scene where you can hear waves, and that isn't added. So it was great. We got lucky too, because we still really didn't know what we were doing. So we had a lot more room for mistakes. If you're like, well, you're here. So,
okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Neat. And I mean, if it didn't work out, like, I mean, at least you have an Airbnb that you're staying at,
Yeah. It was fun. I mean, it also was an easier sell. Which were like, you're doing what? You can't pay me. What are we doing? And they're like, yeah, you want to drive to Nova Scotia with us? They're like, oh, cool. Yeah, that sounds like a blast. So.
Airbnb, not a sponsor.
Yeah, not a sponsor, but thank you. Also, the guy who rented us, his name was Rolf. He owns the house. Okay. And if you want to find it, it's in Peggy's Cove, Nova Scotia. It's listed, and he's wonderful. He was like, what are you guys doing?
I was going to ask if you still have the link. Like, I'll put it in the blog post.
Yeah. All right. I'll try to find it.
Okay, cool. Now, going back a minute or maybe a couple minutes, that scene with Jordan, where she was like, "Are you really gonna do it that way?" What scene is that one?
Oh, that's the first time we meet in the stairwell.
Okay.
So and we shot that in just a little stairwell under the office that I lived in basically for like 3.5 years. That was like our headquarters. That's the stairwell to get up to the office. And I think that was like the first week of filming. That was before we went to Nova Scotia. So we both were like watching each other, being like, "Oh, this is how you're gonna do this." And it was interesting because I mean, all of my normal first choices are like the most emotional version of something, and she's a bit smaller. And it also was both of us being like, how operatic is the movie? Like, how sweaty and crying is everyone? Do we see people when they're calm? Like, what pitch is this at? So I don't know, it's this wonderful thing of collaboration, and it changed, and she made the scene better. All of them would choose it. Okay,
neat. So your first vision of it was like more emotional kind of thing?
I think so. It was just like I was just a mess. I think we did it like twice, and I was like, having like a breathing panic attack or something. So I like that scene. I love that scene a lot.
Okay, cool. Now I don't know if you want to ruin the illusion, but like, how much of this is green screen?
I think it's somewhere around like, I don't know. I mean, well, there's a lot of stuff that also is practical that we then affected. So like the amount of the film that has no visual effects on it, like the amount of shots in the movie that have no visual effects on it, I think is like somewhere around 30%.
Okay.
Maybe a little less. So it's like a massive amount of movie has been affected. However, the thing that I used to say a lot, because people wouldn't believe me, is I'd be like, basically from, let me see if I can get this right again. No, okay, so from when Hayden makes a phone call, and the phone call is to Moira in her house, and then she goes to sleep. She falls asleep on the porch, wakes back up, and Lawrence is there. From that scene, her receiving the phone call until the end of the film, the credits of the film, that takes place all inside the same warehouse room. Even the backseat of the car, we built a fake backseat of the car. So that entire bit is in basically a big empty space that we just kept rearranging.
What?
Did you get the behind the scenes documentary?
I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, cool! Wow.
Realizing now I should have, but I'm going to today then.
No, it's almost more fun that way. But you could see it, how we sort of. I keep saying I'm like a theater kid, so it sort of felt like, there's a version of that where you could be like, oh, this really sucks. Like, we're just trapped in this room and we're not actually getting to film this stuff. But there's another version where you get everybody to calm down, and everyone's able to do their best work, and you're able to kind of play with it. And that was like really fun because, you know, like Jordan and I got like 1 to 2 takes, and then everybody else, we were like, well, we're here all night. Let's just keep trying it. And, you know, we're like sitting down and drinking tea and, you know, like being like, let's try the scene again. It's like totally different than me like having a panic attack, like holding a baby in Nova Scotia, being like, what are we doing here? You know, do we have enough lights? So
that's, yeah, you could see my face drop, like, wait, you did all that in a warehouse? That's awesome. Yeah. Now I think it does work though, like just it makes it look more fantastical. Like I think one of my favorite shots, besides like the great visuals and like that with like the illumination in the background and just the shadows, that was awesome. But I loved seeing at that one point, I won't spoil like in terms of story, but just that one scene in the car, that main one in the car, and it looks like the car is kind of floating over the plains. Like just it's like on the ground, but it's just like kind of floating. I thought that was really cool. Was that like intentional?
Yeah. I think it is, again, one of these results of having improper technical methods. So it's like, for example, if like a traditional visual effects house did that shot, they would build a 3-dimensional car. They would take a 3D car model, they would rig it, and then they would run it over whatever ground model they had made, and then that would exist in the, you know. I didn't have the ability to do that at that point. Now I would be able to do that both because of, I guess, my own experience and the technical advances of these programs. There are programs now that would change the entire version I made the movie. Okay. So basically what we have are like digital matte paintings in Photoshop, and I paint like a layer of headlights, you know, put like 2 little white dots, and you're like, that looks like a car. And then you're just like animating it, you know, like 2D layers. So that's like what a lot of that stuff is. And again, that's why partially the movie looks very strange, because like there's a digital, I think the movie is made in a digital manner that almost replicates the sort of, you know, imagination of like early analog visual effects, which people seem to have a response to because it feels fake in a way where you're like, oh, it doesn't feel like a simulation fake. That feels like they're approximating what this would look like, which I guess is the painting thing. We were trying to think about it like painting.
Okay. I think it has a charm to it for sure.
Good. Yeah. We didn't really want it to look real. You know, we just wanted it to look like its own thing.
Okay. As long as the story feels real, right?
Yeah, totally.
Now, I was curious if you wanted to speak to just your kind of evolution as like an VFX supervisor working on the upcoming Green Knight, and just to adding directing to your portfolio. What has that been like? Yeah,
so the directing was always the hope. You know, that was like what I imagined I wanted to do. And in my early 20s, I was trying to find anything I could do that would allow me to be part of the world, you know, of like independent movies and people who were making movies and people whose movies I really loved. While at the same time sort of being like, well, I want to make these movies, my films one day, and I know they have visual effects in them. And if I'm like raising my hand and being like, I'll work for free, which is what I did for years, the most obvious spot that no one has any money for or idea of what to do with is visual effects for independent films.
Okay.
So I just basically took those years to sit down and, you know, live on very, very, very meager means, you know, and be like, okay, all I have to do all day is watch YouTube videos and figure out how to do this. And that's kind of what I did. And knew just about enough to start the movie. And then that was like, once, you know, you're like riding the tiger. Once you start it, then you got to figure out how to finish it. And that is what took 5 years. And then at the end of that process, at no point had I been hired in any traditional sense, or have I ever worked for a traditional visual effects company. However, at the very like last year and a half of that movie, once the visual effects started to look good, which they did not look good for a long period of time,
okay,
then, you know, I started to meet more people, and it kind of, people knew of me as one of these kids that just was around doing free visual effects work for everyone and like doing anything it could. But then once that stuff got better, then people were like, oh, this is like really exciting. And then I would show them my movie, filmmakers and other people, to be like, this is the thing I'm trying to do. And they'd be like, this cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars and you're doing it. Can you do it over here? And then at that point, also I had more time because the movie was like changing from being like, let's work on this 16 hours a day every day for years, to being like, I can work on this 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and then 2 days a week I can try to buy food and make some money. That's when I was able to work on more stuff. And then that led to just meeting more people. And then in the past year is when the different stuff happened, like with the Green Knight. So everything shut down. The Green Knight lost basically its release date, and David Lowery had more time because he was like, well, the movie's not coming out now. And I think he had said that he had finished it way sooner than he would have liked to get it done on time. So they had a couple shots. Toby Hall Brooks called me and he was like, I got a couple shots that are undone, unfinished. Do you want to try them? And I was like, I saw the trailer like everyone else, and I was like, this is the most exciting movie ever. I can't wait to see this. And so I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my God, the Green Knight. And then I have now heard from other people that David had said to them where he was like, yeah, we met this kid. He said he could do all this stuff. I don't know if he can, but we're going to see if he can.
Okay.
So, and I was terrified. So yeah, that's what I spent this summer doing, and a large portion of the fall as I was sort of finishing up the Wanting Mare, just making stuff, which looks very different than the Wanting Mare because it's, basically an entire new set of tools and skills and the stuff that I wish I knew how to do. So there's some wild stuff in there. And then currently I'm doing concept design for Peter Pan and Wendy with David. And that's equally wild and fun.
Okay. So I'm going to get there in a sec, but just to go back a bit. So you're self-taught doing this on YouTube?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I'm a child of YouTube.
Holy shit,
sure.
Dude. That's amazing.
I mean, I think YouTube is like I don't know. I'm really sort of conceited about education to begin with, because I didn't do homework in high school and middle school, and I would go home and be like, well, I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna read what I want to read, which is like not a good way to educate yourself. However, it has it has benefited me in this sense. Film school and those sort of things give you an amazing network of people who make movies. So that's what took me the long time to find. However, the skills were on the job education, and just like, which is amazing. It's amazing that you can do that. And I literally still every morning I'm like watching YouTube people and be like, oh, that's a cool way to do that, and like learning constantly every day.
So that's a real success story, from YouTube to working with David Lowery. What does it mean to you, though, that he just took a chance on you like that? That's awesome.
It's incredible. I mean, it speaks to David's manner of making movies, which I have heard of and been a fan of and wanted to be, for years. And so I wanted to meet him for years. And I actually met him once in like 2012, which he doesn't remember. And I was like, hi, I'm a huge fan of yours. And he was like, cool. And anyway, he has found a way to make movies on a large scale that is intensely personal and intimate, and is made by a small group of people that aren't, like at the ebbs and flows of whatever the industry is. He has a real film family. And I love that. And I love the mix of the professionalism of it, and that he gets up and he makes movies all day. Like, what an amazing treat. So I'm like intensely lucky to have, that they were like, what are you doing? We like you, come over here. So it's just a constant learning experience. Cause I thought I'd get on that movie and be like horrified, and three people would invite me to three other people, and they'd be like, David is behind this room and he has said this about your work. And it was like David like texting me being like, this looks cool, can we do this? So it was like, I was like, oh, he's doing the same thing that we were trying to do. And that's why he's good at it, because their stuff means things to him. He's not just like, I don't know, this is what we're doing today. So can't say enough about him. He's the best.
Okay, that's awesome.
Mhm.
The Wanting Mare is on demand on February 5th, or how's it being released?
Correct. Yeah, it's on VOD. So it should be like iTunes movies and Amazon Prime and all that sort of stuff. And I think a Blu-ray is going to come out at some point, in like a month or two. And we're going to release a behind-the-scenes documentary on February 5th, which is 35 minutes. And that is, I sometimes love just as much of the movie. I mean, it's very new. We just made it, but I really like it. And hopefully it's exciting for people, especially people who are trying to do something similar.
Okay, thanks. And is the film coming to drive-in theaters or just video on demand?
They're still figuring that out right now. I know.
Okay.
I just found out last night it's going to be at a drive-in in Austin. I think there's some drive-ins potentially in LA, and then it'll also be in like virtual cinemas. So if you want to support, cinema chains, you can rent it from them as well, like Lemley in California, and I'm not quite sure which one is in New York, but yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully it'll get out there.
All right. I hope people enjoy the film. So,
yeah.
Nicholas, do you want me to say your middle name or no?
You can drop it, I guess.
Okay. Nicholas Bateman, director, writer, actor, producer, editor, VFX supervisor of The Wanting Mare. Thank you for chatting with me on the Filmcraziest Show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.